Steven Roy Goodman, host of Higher Education Today. Welcome back to the education program that connects you to contemporary issues, people, and institutions involved in the world of higher education. Today's show is a special joint production of the University of the District of Columbia and Prince George's Community Television. I'm here in Largo, Maryland, where we'll be talking about universities and sustainability. Dr. Gerrit Knaap is a professor of urban studies and executive director of the National Center for Smart Growth Research and Education at the University of Maryland. Gerrit serves on the State of Maryland Smart Growth Subcabinet and Sustainable Growth Commission. Kiel Edson is a master's degree candidate in conservation biology and environmental public policy at the University of Maryland. Kiel is a former Marine who has also worked at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Welcome.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
Well, we're delighted you're here. Gerrit, maybe if we can start with you. What's the difference between smart growth and sustainability?
Sure. Well, I suppose I should start by defining what smart growth is. And smart growth is really a term that's become widely known to describe making better cities. How do we make cities better places to live? Sometimes viewed as the antithesis of sprawl. So cities that are growing smartly are generally more compact, they're more transit friendly, they're more pedestrian friendly, and people tend to live closer to where they work. Sustainability is a bit of a broader concept. It has to do not only with building better cities, but it has to do with resource preservation, has to do with energy, has to do with making a lighter footprint throughout the environment, throughout the globe.
And what is the University of Maryland doing in both those areas right now? And I was a little confused about how you got involved initially with the folks in Frederick.
Sure. Well, the University of Maryland has a broad mission to serve the state of Maryland as well as the communities throughout the state. So the state of Maryland has long had a reputation for being a leader in smart growth. So in the 1990s, under Governor Paris Glendening, there was a center created at the University of Maryland. It is now known as the Center for Smart Growth, which I direct. So this center has been in operation for nearly 15 years. The university has been involved in sustainability issues almost from the very beginning. If sustainability is really about protecting natural resources, about protecting the environment, one can really say that the university has been about this for a very long time.
And Kiel, so how do you loop in here? What is it that you're doing in Frederick that ties into your work at the University of Maryland?
Okay, so I'm a graduate student, obviously, at the university. I'm also helping to coordinate this new program that we're setting up, or have already launched, called the Partnership for Action Learning and Sustainability, like the PALS program on campus. And what that does basically is we court a community in the state, try to work with them to develop projects and things that are sustainability focused, problems that they're facing, environmental challenges, economic, social issues. And then we shop those around on campus to try to find courses that are relevant to that subject matter, and they can focus their efforts for that semester, that academic year, on the project that's presented to us from the city. So I'm in one of the, aside from just being part of the PALS program, I'm also in an advanced conservation biology course that is looking at how climate change is affecting the Frederick watershed. So we do a three-part study. One part is looking at how climate change has affected the watershed in the past in terms of erosion and rainfall, just the change in the forest structure, the tree composition, everything like that. There's also a component that's looking at invasive species and the spread of those throughout the forest. So climate change with changing weather patterns is known to accelerate invasives in some areas. So we're trying to see if that's also true for Frederick. And then there's another kind of future casting component of the project where they're looking at like the next 40 or 50 years and how climate change is likely going to be affecting their water supply. It's a very important resource for them. They get about 30% of their water from the watershed that they own. So it's meaningful for them to know exactly what their water future is going to look like. So we're trying to help them with that.
And so which students are actually doing that? Students who have some expertise in this, or students who are developing an expertise in this?
Both, I guess. The graduate students that I'm working with have a really diverse background. Some of us have come from jobs before starting our grad school programs that dealt specifically with climate change adaptation issues and things like that. I've done some like invasive species surveys when I was working with the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center in Edgewater, but most of us are kind of developing these skill sets as we move along, and that's the benefit of the PALS program, is that we get to learn a lot of the details of these subjects in class and then apply them out in the field with the city of Frederick. So it's a really exciting way to take the course concepts and apply them to the real world problems that Maryland communities are facing.
Well, what about other states and other countries? Presumably climate change affects us all. Not presumably, climate change does affect us all. Are other universities around the world also involved in some of the efforts like what you gentlemen are doing?
Well, let me give you a little bit of broader context about PALS, right? The Partnership for Action, Learning, and Sustainability. So universities around the world have usually a tripart mission of teaching, research, and service. And so the PALS program is a program that we created within the National Center for Smart Growth, which I direct, that tries to integrate a couple of these missions. So we know we have a teaching mission at the university, and our teaching mission, covers the wide range of things that the university teaches, from social science to natural science to journalism to engineering, you name it. And for the most part, students take courses in those areas and to become professionals when they get out or receive degrees. The idea behind the PALS program is that the students actually engage in real-world problems that local communities need addressed. So in that way, the university is not only providing students with real-world experience in problems that they're going to confront when they are professionals, but it helps the communities address these problems that they really need addressed. So in some sense, the idea behind the PALS program is something that universities all over the country and all over the world have been doing for a long time. The real innovation here is the packaging of a large number of programs and courses focused on a particular community and trying to address the particular problems of that community. And all of them are to be focused in some way on sustainability. So my guess is that you take a university anywhere in the world and they will have something like this, but the real innovation here is the packaging of this and working with one community at a time and engaging the whole campus, students from a variety of disciplines on that one community.
Well, with all due respect, this seems a little vague in some ways as someone who's an educational advisor and I'm talking to a student who's thinking about studying something. How do I say to them, you may want to think about the PALS program at the University of Maryland? What are they going to get from that as a student, as opposed to going to another university?
Well, and the answer is this. You actually get to do something that's real, that's going to make communities better off, and you're not going to have to sit in a classroom and do artificial exercises and wait until you are a graduate to do real world stuff, but you will come into the University of Maryland, you will immediately get an opportunity to work with people, to work with professionals and solve the problems that we face in the everyday real world.
And Kyle, do you see that that's actually happening for you as a student?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges that we've been dealing with in our project were not understanding the course concepts, but it was dealing with the data needs and working with the city and working with the Department of Natural Resources, and the logistics of doing the study are something that I don't think we'd get access to in a class. I know we wouldn't get access to in a classroom. So it's been useful not only because we get to apply those concepts to those problems in Frederick, but working with a real client and working with real data to produce something that's useful to the city has kind of been more challenging in other areas than I was expecting, honestly. It's been a great experience for us so far.
Well, that's great. And in terms of the experience, I wonder about the politics of this. Because if it was so easy to kind of sort this out, we all would have done that years ago, right? So what is it that how do you deal with the folks in Frederick or elsewhere who say, well, we like your idea, but we don't have the political courage to do X, Y, Z?
For our specific project, we're looking at making management recommendations for the city, and they are completely in control of the watershed. So they're looking at just safeguarding their water resources for the next, for the future. So that our focus isn't necessarily to kind of convince people that climate change is a threat that's going to affect them directly, and here's how. That's something that'd be really challenging to do, especially in the time frame that we're working with. But we're trying to give the city some data that they can use to show people that this is what the University of Maryland students have this is what their analysis has produced. This is what how climate change has affected our area. It's not just a broad East Coast analysis. It's very specific to the watershed. How has rainfall changed? How are invasives spreading? What is the water going to look like? Are we going to need to source other water from areas around us? Is the watershed going to produce more water? What are we going to be dealing with? So it's a little bit narrower of a focus than a sort of like a kind of bringing everybody on board with climate change. That's a much more challenging political problem. You know, there's people that just don't buy into the science, when that's not really something we're trying to focus on, honestly.
Well, fair enough. And in terms of bringing it back to the University of Maryland, what about other students at the University of Maryland who are not in your program? Who maybe they study public policy generally, maybe they study engineering, maybe they study political science. How do you get them excited about the work that you gentlemen are doing?
It's actually been really easy. Generally, students like to learn, but they also like to do. And so just the creation of the program has really created quite a buzz at the university, that we are already getting feedback from students who are interested in the University of Maryland because of the program. And we know that there are students now actively seeking courses that are part of the PALS program. So getting students engaged has not been difficult, but the other important thing to remember is not everybody has to be engaged, right? If you want to be a student and focus, you know, in class on stuff that you don't want to necessarily get involved in the real world, you certainly have that option. And I think it's also important to mention that that's true for faculty as well. Right, that some faculty are really excited about this opportunity. They've taught introduction to geography for many years, and they continue to do that, while there are others who are looking for a new opportunity to engage the course that they have taught for many years, but actually focus on the real world problem that a particular community has identified, and to use that as the basis for some case studies and some experiments that they wouldn't otherwise have the chance to do.
And how do you get faculty and students together to kind of talk about what you learned and how you, let's say, would compare to something that's going on in California or something that's going on in Kenya?
Well, I would argue that we don't really do that, right? So, I mean, the advantage of the program is that it really is focused on a particular community. I guess the disadvantage is it's hard to do that in Kenya. The idea behind this idea, again, is the concentrated focus of 30 courses in one particular community. It would be really hard to do that in Kenya. So I don't think we do those sort of cross-national comparisons in this particular program.
And what about California? Because certainly some of the issues we're facing in Maryland are some of the same issues that we're facing in California and or Kenya and or elsewhere.
Well, that's absolutely true. Sustainability certainly is a topic that needs to be addressed worldwide. It's a worldwide phenomenon. Rising sea level clearly is something that's worldwide, and climate change and so forth. And there are programs like this at other universities. Our inspiration for this program came from the University of Oregon, which they called it the Sustainable City Year program. And so we basically borrowed this idea from them. But there are other universities now all across the country who are adopting this model. But again, each of those universities is focusing on communities within their region and not trying to do the whole world or the entire United States.
That's interesting. And if we can pivot a little bit, Kyle, you were in the Marines. Mm-hmm. I think you may be the first Marine who's been on our show.
All right.
So, which is a compliment. I mean,
okay.
That's great.
I was like, that's a good thing, right?
This is we're proud of that. Okay. But I guess the question is, how did you go from being a Marine to being involved in what you're being involved in, and what you're involved with now?
I'll try to keep it short. Like a lot of people in my discipline, we're kind of outdoorsy. My dad was a backpacker, so we always had a connection to the environment that kind of translated to wanting to pursue that for my career. So actually, while I was in the Marines, I spent some time in Iraq, and there's a pretty well-known ecological disaster happened in the Mesopotamian marshes, where they were basically drained, completely desiccated, and the livelihoods of a lot of native peoples was just destroyed by that. So it was a huge environmental disaster, and I got a little bit of exposure to that while I was there, just to see what it had turned into, because it is kind of the cradle of civilization. That's supposedly one of the most biodiversity-rich areas on the planet, or was. So that triggered something, I think, when I saw how immense the impact humans can have on the planet. So when I came and got out of the military, I originally was going pre-med just because it seemed challenging, but then I decided that that wasn't for me. By then I had taken a lot of biology courses and realized that's where my interests lie. So I followed my nose and found conservation biology, and the more I studied, the more I loved it. So I came out to Maryland for an internship at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, like I mentioned. And that's how I was exposed to the University of Maryland for the first time and discovered the program. And it just seemed like a perfect fit because it blended conservation biology with environmental policy. A lot of programs focus on one or the other. So it was a really good program for me. So then I moved out here from California.
Fair enough. And if you could change anything about the program, would there be something that you would change?
For PALS or for the conservation biology component?
Both.
Both. No, I kind of stumbled into PALS a little bit. It didn't exist when I signed up for my classes. So I got the graduate assistantship position with them and started working on developing the program and talking to the other universities that had similar projects. And originally I hadn't intended to take one of their courses. It was just by happenstance that the conservation bio course that I was planning to take was signing up for a PALS project, and I was unaware. So I've been pleasantly surprised. A lot of the students in my class are really excited about being able to go take trips out to Frederick to collect data or do surveys or work with the city to make those connections. And some of them may be planning to continue these projects on their own, or they're making connections that might develop into something, at least letters of recommendation or career opportunities as they network. It's been really good for that. I think it's nice to get out of the classroom from time to time and get to do some real work with real people instead of sitting in front of a PowerPoint.
Well, what about high school students and undergraduate students? What advice would both of you have for high school students, let's say, who are thinking about maybe going into conservation biology or going into this field? What would you encourage them to do and to study?
I think, well, one, I think it's a really good field to get into right now. Environmental policy and conservation is becoming more and more of an issue. You can tell that the attention that climate change is getting is really good. It's one component of a lot of other issues like land use that are problematic for species and habitat conservation. So it is a really good field. Obviously, I'm dedicating my life to it, so I would encourage anyone that is interested to go ahead and pursue it. But I don't know, as far as coursework, I think in high school you're kind of restricted as to what courses you can take. They kind of prescribe those to you. So it's, if you like biology, this is kind of, I think, where a lot of the work is happening right now, is trying to kind of somehow safeguard the natural resources in the environment from the impacts of human population growth and urbanization. And smart growth is a way to do that, and sustainability is a way to build more smartly.
So if I could respond to that. So I took as little biology as I possibly could. I'm an economist by training, right? And so natural science was a field that was of interest, but not really my thing. And so I think this is part of the beauty of, one, the field of sustainability, but also the PALS program. So it can embrace people like Kyle, who's taken a lot of biology, is really interested in that, and people like me who have very little interest in that, but are trained more in the social sciences and want to apply our social science skills to these problems as well. And I think one of the other interesting things about the PALS program is, we've got journalists engaged, we've got people in arts and humanities engaged, we've got people from a real variety of backgrounds. So, the question about high school is, you got to do well in high school. I think that's clear. For any field that you go into, you got to have strong communication, strong analytical skills. But if you want to make the world a better place to be, and you want to make it more sustainable and equitable, really there are really quite a number of different disciplines that you can focus on and yet contribute to this field.
Fair enough. And in terms of the field itself, how do you stay abreast as a professor about what's going on around the country and around the world?
Well, I talk a lot to students like Kyle, right? They're really smart, and they stay on top of stuff all over the world. Now, of course, it's hard to stay on top of everything. I of course, maintain a close relationship with my professional field, which is urban planning. I also read economics journals. I try to stay on top of things. But we can only be experts in so broad of a field. So again, the great thing about sustainability is we require the contributions of people in many fields. And I don't have to know the biology, fortunately. I can rely on people like Kyle to know that.
And in terms of urban studies, is there an association if people wanted to get more information about the field of urban studies?
Sure. Well, The professional discipline is called planning, so urban planning. There's an American Planning Association, that is the Association of Professional Planners. Urban studies is a little bit more about the field of study, the academic study of the field of cities. And so, I mean, there is no professional association of urban studies, but the planning field is a well-established field with lots of resources that you can go to find out more about that, including, of course, our website.
Fair enough. And in terms of students, how do you interact with other students in other disciplines?
For our PALS projects, kind of building off of what he mentioned, I do think, when I think of sustainability, because I'm in environmental work, that's how I approach it. I think about climate change and having a smaller carbon footprint, that sort of stuff. But our project is working with some of the media folks. They like some of our efforts in the forest are very photogenic, so they like to follow us around and take photos and do stories on some of the projects that we're doing. There's a lot of overlap in some of the projects that are working in the city proper, where they're doing urban redevelopment, and we're doing a project with the Carroll Creek has an algae problem that a landscape plant scientist course is tackling. So there's a lot of overlap in those courses where students can work between disciplines. For our conservation biology class, because we're removed in the watershed, it's a little bit harder to kind of cross-pollinate with other projects. But I know that a lot of other courses are working between disciplines.
What about the National Park Service? Have you interacted with them in some ways?
We haven't. For our project, we've worked with the Department of Natural Resources. They have 2 foresters that are dedicated to the Frederick Municipal Forest. So they've been really helpful in providing data, GIS maps for us so we can plan our survey efforts and making sure that the product that we're producing is useful to both them and the city of Frederick, so they can take it and either build on it. If the data that we gather is really useful to them, they can continue the study. Or it helps inform decisions that are on the table right now, things that they're trying to work through with us. There's ad hoc committees that are looking at balancing recreational use and natural resource conservation in the forest, trying to protect species and reduce erosion in the watershed. So we want to make sure the product that we give them is useful to that discussion.
But if I can get back to this political issue that I raised before, this seems to be a very contentious thing. So let's say you advise X, Y, Z, but what if the political leaders or the city council or the county council says that's a great idea, but I don't want to do it?
That won't happen. I mean, that's one of the great things about this program is these are new ideas. These are ideas that the community can accept or not accept. Decisions made in the political arena at the community level are decisions made by politicians in the community level. So just like any other advice or any other community input that's provided to them, they can take it or leave it. The idea here is to get more information, to get the help of students who have new ideas, and often they get these new ideas at a reduced cost. So most politicians actually like that.
Well, fair enough. We have a few minutes to go, but I guess where I wanted to take this next was, what about students from other countries who want to come to the United States and perhaps study at the University of Maryland or study in the PALS program? Could they do something like that?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know what the percent of foreign students is in the courses of our program, but it's not a small percentage. We have a lot of foreign students at the University of Maryland. I'm sure that they are in the disciplines that are involved in the PALS program, and I think we probably have a tremendous record of training students from foreign countries to address issues of sustainability, and they can then go back to their countries and make their places more sustainable places to live.
I know that in my class we have 2 students, one PhD and one master's student, who are both from Brazil, and they're here on a scholarship that the government provides, so they come here, do their studies, and then go back and have some commitment to work there. So it's really interesting to work with them because they're always able to bring in the similar issues that they've dealt with in their work in Brazil and apply them to the problems that we're dealing with Frederick. So they have some really innovative ideas. We're able to add a lot to our conversations and have been fantastic to work with. That's only an anecdote, but I know that a good portion of our class is from overseas, which has been great.
And what about other people who've had military experience? Have there been other people in the military who've been involved in conservation efforts?
I haven't met, I'm kind of a rare breed, I guess. I haven't met a lot of former military in the environmental sciences, and I'm not exactly sure why that is. But I mean, a lot of us end up getting out and doing similar work to what we were trained to do in the military, and that is often not environmentally focused. So I haven't encountered more than a handful, I think, of former military that are doing this sort of work. I'm sure there are in other departments that I'm just not exposed to. But.
And are you in touch with any of your former colleagues in the military in terms of talking with them about the environmental work in the hopes that perhaps other people in the military might become involved?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I have a lot of friends in the area. A lot of former military settle in the D.C. area because there's a lot of work to be had. So I think that most of them are engaged environmentally. They're aware of trying to kind of reduce their impacts and things. I think the younger generations is like the climate change debate, for example, is not really an issue. Everybody's kind of accepting of it as kind of a scientific certainty at this point, basically. So everybody's moving in that direction to try to live more sustainable lives, and it will trickle up to the political levels, hopefully, where really meaningful action will start to happen, where policies will be in place to reduce our national scale impacts on the environment. But I haven't been trying to woo my former military friends to my side necessarily. They all have pretty good job security.
But I would add that the military is one of the major stewards and owners of land all over the world. And so, I mean, we used to get contracts from the Army Corps of Engineers, which of course has a major responsibility in being an environmental steward. And land, many of the bases around the world are like cities. And so they're very interested in smart growth and resource conservation and making sure they have to deal with things like the Endangered Species Act. So there's quite a bit of research actually that happens within the military with respect to sustainability.
But what about, just to bring it back to the University of Maryland, how do you encourage students at the University of Maryland to focus more on throwing their trash out or not wasting water or something simple like that, which is important but still simple?
Simple, but this one of the things that Kyle mentioned is the extent to which the journalism program and the communications program are involved in this. And so the problem of environmental communication, right, and getting people to change their behaviors is a real challenge. And so, Kyle likes to be an optimist and believe that we are becoming more environmental stewards over time, and I think there's some merit to that argument. But I would make the point that this is also part of the challenge, that we need behavioral scientists to figure out how we encourage people to behave in more sustainable ways. We need communications people to make sure that the communication goes from the university out to the community. So the challenge of sustainability really can involve people from all these different disciplines in order to achieve the things that you've described.
Well, on that note, I think we're going to have to say goodbye. But before we do, I just wanted to acknowledge one mistake that I made. Kyle, you are the second Marine to be on the show. The first one was Jim Lair. Okay. Yeah. But I thought of him, of course, as a famous journalist. So you're the second Marine. Okay. But if you're walking in Jim Lair's footsteps, you're off to a great start. Good to know. Thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you would like additional information about Dr. Gerrit Knaap or Kiel Edson, please visit smartgrowth.umd.edu. If you have comments or suggestions about higher education today, please send an email to our viewer mailbox at highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. Thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. Please join me again for another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm Steven Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.